Hello, and welcome to the weekly voice chat for the Men's Humans Rights Discord server. We are the semi official Discord server of the Men's Rights subreddit. And today we have another open talk. You guys enjoyed it the last time we did it, so this is kind of a general free talk where we're just going to chat. So welcome in, and we'll see how this talk develops. Now, do pay attention to the text channel, the text chat. Some people say it's just as much of the main event, if not more so. Now, Jorp, you were saying something interesting. You were saying, not to toot my own horn, but you were actually saying that you recognized me from the Bosch debate.
Yeah, I did. That was I'd been watching Vosh for a while at that point, and I'd been mostly enjoying the debates of his I watched. So it was like a really big. It was a very stark contrast when I saw that one and felt like burning rage. I couldn't.
Yeah, I've enjoyed. I disagree with him on. I don't want to say virtually everything because here's where people confuse me for being a right winger. I'm very much against what most people who claim to be progressives actually end up saying and doing. But when it comes to liberal values, I'd say most of my values are probably what I would consider liberal. But these days, liberal and conservative, I don't even know what they're supposed to mean anymore. But
Their aesthetic
no,
choices.
yeah. But no, I mean, Vaush is someone who, to what do you think he? I mean, I have more respect for him certainly than a lot of these grifty YouTube channels. The question I have with him, which is a question that comes up a lot in this server and in the men's rights movement in general, to what extent are anti-MRAs being disingenuous, and to what extent are anti-MRAs just wrong about who we are, or just misinformed about who we are or what we believe? Because I've certainly changed minds in conversations by simply talking to people, and then they say, you're not what I thought an MRA was, and I said, well, what did you think an MRA was? And they said, well, I thought you were misogynistic and alt-right and pro-life and all of these different things. And I said, well, actually, the men's rights movement isn't about that at all. And I find that conversation can be very powerful.
I feel like a good distinction to make when those kinds of misunderstandings happen is probably between like men's rights and manosphere, or other like specific things like pickup artists and incels and MGTOWs.
Yeah, and the Trump era has just made everything completely crazy. Everything. Yeah. It's like taking all the settings and setting it all to 100. It's impossible now. Sorry?
We should probably move off politics.
Oh, okay.
Political stream. But it's the Vosh debate. I didn't actually see that, but I saw a good deal of the Sam Cedar debate until I just turned it off in disgust because his team kept lowering your volume so that you couldn't be heard on their stream, and then talking over you, and he called you insane as the that was his starting premise, was calling you insane. Then you had all the little details of the other people on the stream rolling their eyes, making childish gestures, they were teenage girls pretending to bath and stuff. It was stupid. It was.
I don't.
Sam Cedar was a comedian before he was a political commentator, so it's not too surprising, is it?
A comedian, you say? Not a very good one,
unless I have it misunderstood. I mean, I know he worked with John Benjamin on stuff, and he was an actor on Sex and the City, I'm pretty sure.
Well, that's interesting backstory, but Blue, do you want to give us your thoughts on that, on the stream that you did with him?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just encapsulates the ignorance surrounding the anti-MRA sentiment. I mean, it really shows how people who are against the men's rights movement either don't know what they're talking about or are being disingenuous and just willing to lie. And Sam and Co. showed. I've been recently making videos breaking it down. I'm going to continue. I've stopped on part 3. Or I think part 2 for now, just because it's very annoying going back and going through it. But I'm going to finish it. And there's so many points he said that are just completely either disingenuous or irrelevant or not understanding how math works. But yeah, it was very reaffirming for me. You know, if I'm ever questioning if I'm on the right side, you know, watch a few minutes of that and then answer the question pretty quickly. You know, I mean, Vosh is someone who, like, if I went to a YouTube convention, which I probably wouldn't, because I think they're a waste of time, but if I were to go to a YouTube convention, let's say I, you know, saw Vosh across the room, yeah, we probably nod in, you know, familiarity or fist bump or whatever, say, hey, what's up? You know, we probably wouldn't be getting drinks together, but if I saw Sam in public, I would completely ignore him. So, no respect there.
So, but I want to just point out there was an exact moment when I shut off the Vosh debate and I like couldn't keep listening to it because it was just so infuriating. Where he basically said to you, it was like about halfway through the debate, but you were basically just trying to appeal to empathy. If I remember, you were just trying to like talk about like, hey, like, you know, there are like X and Y like reasons why like guys will end up being pushed into this movement, will end up in this movement, like feel like this is the only movement that will represent them, or however, you know, however the conversation went. And his reaction was basically like nothing more than like, oh, well, you know, you can ask why are people racist and why are people misogynists, but you know, you don't have to. Like as though that reducing you and your community down to nothing more than a pejorative, and just like not being willing to like engage more charitably than that. It made me really fucking angry.
Yeah, the implication being that the men's rights movement is inherently misogynistic, which I will say that was part of him. That was the one part of him that mostly that was the part that to most came across to me as possibly in bad faith, because I don't think I had said anything to demonstrate misogyny at that point, and why would I? I never would anyway, so I would never slip up and say something wrong because I genuinely don't feel that way. But
everything he said was in bad faith, like just right from the start. I mean, I've spoken to racists and people like that and sexists, and you can generally have a conversation with them and you can talk about why they think the things they do, and you can sometimes talk them out of it by just, you know, going through the facts in a very gentle, nice sort of conversational way where you don't make them feel threatened, because the reason they're like that is either because, one, they had some sort of bad experience or something that they have fixated on, and they are now really afraid of this particular group of people, or two, they've been so brainwashed by the group of people they're in that they just don't know what reality is like. So just guiding them out of that is the best way to fix them. And you can fix them. They're not irreparable in most cases, but people just don't try.
I would agree in some cases, but do you really think in most cases?
I think that in most cases, if you can find what the button is that's driving them, you can talk them down from it. I mean, I've seen, you remember that guy who made friends with members of the KKK, that black guy, And,
Yes, I think
ended up giving them his robe.
Daryl Davis, I think.
Yeah, and they ended up giving him their robes and quitting the KKK and stopping being racist and stuff like that. Like, that's all he did. He just talked to them. He was just a human being to them, and they started to say things like, they respect him more than they respect the reporters who, turn up to their rallies to, like, try and ask them load questions and things like that. And that guy is an emblem of how you should deal with racists and people like that. You don't deal with them by shutting them down and shutting them out, because that just means they go off and they make a little group of people who agree with them. What you do is you bring them out into the light and you clean them up.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's definitely a more
But people aren't willing to do that. Think about terrorists too. Like, people have done that with terrorists. Well, the KKK are basically terrorists, but you can do that with terrorists. You do that with all sorts of people. I mean, you think about Boko Haram. How many of those people in Boko Haram are there because they've been in modern civilized society, and they've had a wide, well-ranging education, they've met lots of people, and how many are in there because they got kidnapped by Boko Haram at a young age and brainwashed and beaten and had horrible things done to them, like sexually abused, that sort of thing, until they have Stockholm syndrome for this group, and it's all they've ever known, basically, and they're stripped of their identity. They are remade into one of their fighters, and so they become tribalistic for this group. I mean, people really underestimate tribalism.
It's very uncomfortable to think about what I'm about to say, and it's uncomfortable to think about the war in Afghanistan in general, from the American perspective, or from any perspective. But every time a U.S. drone or U.S. missile strike killed innocent civilians, how many times do you think that served as a recruiting tool for the Taliban? I mean, imagine you're an 8-year-old.
Every time.
Imagine you're an 8-year-old and your parents are just, peaceful civilians, just farmers. They're not part of the Taliban at all. And you come home and your house is destroyed. Your parents and your sister are dead. What are you going to think? You don't really have access to a modern education. All you know is that the Americans killed your parents. I mean, what are you going to think? How are you going to grow up thinking? So,
yeah, we should mention that, since the Obama era, the American military has basically had this policy, this rule that if the drone strike kills males, then you have to prove that they weren't terrorists. They're automatically terrorists until you prove otherwise, basically.
right. It was that any male between 15 and 50 can be assumed military targets, even if there's nothing suggesting that they're military targets. Any male over the age of 15 can be assumed as a military target. I think it was something along those lines.
Yeah, something like that. And by 15, well, I think it was actually 14, but by 15, 14, they probably mean more like 8, 9, because you know what these sorts of things are like. Oh, you hit the target, oh, they're all in a million pieces. Well, you can't really tell anymore, and nobody's going to check. And this is America slipping into tyranny.
See, it's funny.
But let's move off politics, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of have a little
I was playful.
I was a little playful jab at you there. You say avoid politics, but it's becoming harder and harder to talk about really anything without venturing into politics. I mean, it's really invading all parts of our life. I mean, it's a strange thing. I remember when I was in high school, and Ma and I are about the same age. I'm 29. When I was in high school, in the late 2000s, early 2010, we barely talked about politics at all, and that was when Obama was elected. Think of how controversial that was, and it's like, I cared, I paid attention, but if you talked about politics, you were uncool, basically. People just didn't care. Now, teenagers are obsessed with politics. Everyone seems to be obsessed. Like every single person's Facebook page that I go to has something about Trump or Joe Biden or Liz Truss or something. I mean, it's everywhere. And I think it's extremely unhealthy because it's getting to the point where you can't say anything good or bad about anyone without people immediately assuming that you're a 100% hardcore MAGA or 100% hardcore Biden supporter. It's like, you can say that both Trump and Biden did some things that were good and some things that were bad, but that confuses people now. I mean, it's very strange, and I think it ties into
tribalism.
Yeah, and I think it's people have a similar reaction to the men's rights movement and to feminism, and this is why I've said in the past, I don't think we should be universally harsh on every single person who calls themselves a feminist ever, because a lot of people get sucked into this tribalism, myself included in the past. So, and I think the internet's made it so much worse too, because it's so much easier to be mean to a stranger on Facebook or a stranger on Twitter, especially if the profile picture isn't even their face or if their name isn't even their real name. I mean, it's like it's almost like you're not talking to a real person. Whereas when you see people on the street, you see people face to face, you wouldn't say the things that I see. I mean, go to any political or feminist or similar tweets from a blue check verified user and just scroll down the comment section. I mean, the pure vitriol and hatred. I mean, the almost obsessive hatred that people have, the language that people have, you would almost never hear like at the gym or at the bus stop or at the grocery store. When I see people at the gym, and it's not super common, but it happens, I see people wear political clothing, people around them just ignore them. Right? No one goes up to them and starts yelling at them. But on Twitter, on Facebook, now we have this layer of protection. You don't have to actually see the person, and you don't have to engage with them back if you don't want to. You can just leave a nasty comment and run off. I think it's made people very unhealthy because we're beginning to think that that's how everybody must think. Because you see a very strongly worded tweet from a verified user get 50,000 likes or 50,000 retweets, and you think, oh my god, that's a huge amount of people. 50,000 people is smaller than the population of Delray Beach, Florida, where I live, which is less than 10% of Palm Beach County, which is less than 10% of the state of Florida, which is less than 10% of the United States, which is less than 5% of the entire world. So for a global website like Twitter, 50,000 is a very, very small number of human beings. And it's all of these, the most radical people. If you take the top 1% of the world, that's 70 million people. So the top 1% of fanatical, let's say adults, people of age to use the internet, let's say everyone, 13, 14 and older, I'm just going to ballpark estimate and say that's 45 million people. So the top 1 radical percent of human adults are in the tens of millions of people. And those are the people who are going to be most likely to go on Twitter looking for those kinds of political tweets. And so finding 50,000 isn't actually all that hard when you think about it. And yes, I know not all the world doesn't have the internet and whatnot, but still, 50,000 is such a small percentage of even the United States. But it's easy to look at that and think, oh my God, that's how all of them think. That's how all of them are like, especially when we're tribalistic to begin with. So that's partly why I think we're here today. I think if you go back to the 80s, yeah, there was definitely fierce opposition. I mean, the Kent State Massacre in Vietnam, in the United States over the Vietnam draft, 1968. I mean, we were actually killing university students. So yes, things were tense in the past, but I've asked people who are kind of upper middle age or elderly, do you remember since Vietnam or since MLK, do you remember a time in America that was as divided as right now? And the vast majority say no. I asked them, when is the last time you remember America being as divided as it is now? And they say either Vietnam or MLK. And not to go too off topic, I'll bring that back to men's rights. I think it bleeds into people's perception of the men's rights movement or the manosphere. You know, so it's something that on my channel, on this channel, and men's rights in general, we try and divorce ourselves from politics. You know, we say many times we're not left wing, we're not right wing, but it's kind of an impossible thing to avoid entirely. You know, it bleeds into everything. That way of thinking bleeds into everything, and it bleeds into why some people, if you tell them that you are an MRA, you will immediately get a harshly critical reaction. Not just like, I don't really like that, to be honest. No, you get, and same thing to feminists. There are people who, if you go on Twitter and you say, hi, I'm a feminist, you will get blistering hate immediately without knowing anything about you. And I think that's a problem.
That's why we designed this Discord from the ground up to not be one of those echo chambers. We allow in basically anyone who seems reasonable. So we don't have this issue of everyone being at everyone else's throats, even though the mod team at the server are all different political groups, beliefs, all sorts of religious, national, all sorts of different people. We've had people on here who were just like from every kind of group you could imagine. But on here, we come together for a single purpose, and we put aside all of that tribalism. And so this Discord server is kind of like a little bit of a slice of sanity in this wild world of everyone's got to hate everyone. Like, you can say things for or against any political leader on this Discord, and nobody's really going to get that. I mean, some people might get angry, you might get into a debate, but once the debate boils down, it goes back to normal, and people don't hate each other over it, and they don't end up having wars over it on here. You don't end up with people bullying each other, and I think that's because it's such a melting pot on here that we don't really have that sort of issue. Like on Twitter, you end up in a little group of people who agree with you, and sometimes somebody invades the group from the outside, and then tribalism kicks in, and you have all sorts of arguments, and it's a perpetual war on Twitter. There are arguments about everything going on there all of the time, just constantly, and it's more about who can beat down who than who's right. And generally speaking, we ban the sorts of people who think like that. We've specifically banned people because they think that beating people down is the way you win an argument. So it's about excluding the well, not excluding. It's about just simply keeping people in this state where they have to get along with other people who disagree with them. Like I'm sure we all wildly disagree, even among the mod team, about various things. I mean, I know we disagree about various things because I've had arguments with people in the mod team, but we still come together. And I think that's something that we have to extend to these other websites somehow. The problem is they're designed to cause division because division fuels this sort of cycle of activity. You have algorithms and all that sort of thing designed to, keep you in your bubble and keep you seeing the same content. So if you go on YouTube and you watch a couple of videos from a particular political spectrum, you will then be inundated with videos from that spectrum, and very occasionally from videos from the opposite side, but very, very rarely, especially if the side you're on is the left. If you are on the left, then YouTube has selected that side, and so they selected their algorithm to make sure that voices from that particular side are magnified extremely highly. And it could have been either side. They could have gone with the right, but they went with the left. And now that's creating more divisions because you only hear the one kind of content. Hopefully we'll get more free speech platforms where there are no algorithms like that, where people are free to encounter people of all different beliefs and videos of all different beliefs, so that people can form their own opinions without being in this bubble. But until then, we're kind of stuck with these sites where you have to pick your ideology essentially when you're going in the door, and if you don't, you'll be beaten down.
One thing I would say though is that that I think that is true when it comes to the content that's not being promoted as an ad. But I will say that as somebody who primarily consumes leftist content, I have gotten a lot of Jordan Peterson and Matt Walsh ads.
I'm glad to hear that. I think that people are getting a little bit more canny about it and finding ways around the algorithm and stuff like that. But it's there does seem to be a hard bent towards pushing a certain political ideology, which is simply making that ideology more and more extreme, because people push that ideology and then nobody objects to it, and so they push it harder and harder, and then more extreme beliefs ferment inside the ideology, and it just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling further towards the extreme side, while also becoming more tribalistic about it. So what you need to do is dial that back and have you've been encountering Jordan Peterson videos and things like that. Though I wouldn't say necessarily that Jordan Peterson was right wing. I don't know what his politics are, but you should be encountering people from both the right and the left when you look at political videos online, but that doesn't really seem to be the case. I mean, especially in places where they, like YouTube, where they tend to ban people for holding particular political beliefs.
Jordan Peterson's politics changed a lot after the experimental brain treatment thing.
The what now?
I'm not super up on it, the specifics of it, but there was Blue left. There was a he did some really weird experimental like brain treatment. I don't remember all of the details on it, but it was just noticeable that before that he was like not that crazy, and then after that he was kind of crazy.
I still wouldn't call him crazy, but I do think he did go a little downhill in the last year or so. But the way that he's shamed for reaching out to quote unquote incels is just disgusting. I mean, you know, the same people who talk about toxic masculinity is expressed as men feeling unable to express their feelings, and then when they do, they're viciously mocked. And then when Jordan Peterson comes along and says, "Well, I want to reach out to them and try and help them," he gets viciously mocked for it. How does that make sense?
Yeah, it happens to everyone who tries to humanize them.
Well, it makes sense because if you don't mock incels, you won't get incel killers, and they need incel killers to like fuel their tribalism so that they can say, look, the incels are bad and we can be angry at them and they can be our target to rage against. I mean, I'm being very sarcastic here, but I don't know if you can tell that, but it is a tribal thing. They are the villain group, and every tribalistic group needs a villain group. Like, there's always another tribe that they've got to fight against. It's been the case since forever. It's like, pick a group and you will find that they have an enemy group. It's just or they'll have an enemy. It might be an enemy idea, it might be an enemy person, but they have some sort of enemy.
Yeah, you know, going back to something you said earlier about how well this subreddit gets along, this server gets along. Of all the political leaning ideologies, the best model I've ever seen for a fair and equal and rational society is the men's rights movement, which would sound crazy to people who aren't familiar with the men's rights movement, but to people who spend their time here, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it just so happens to be a group of people who don't give a shit what your gender is, but absolutely care about fairness and equality. It's it's a lot better than the feminist model of I'm a huge grifter and I'm going to influence all these emotionally unstable young people to think that men are evil because then they'll follow me and that gives me power, which is the Proudman model, the you know, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, Clementine Ford, those types. And again, there are many, many people who call themselves feminists who are not like that. And we have more than one, significantly more than one former feminist in this very server.
One of the first articles on our website was from a guy who used to be a feminist. He was brought up in it and he didn't know any different, and this is one of the reasons that I think that we need to talk to people and we need to make sure that we're careful and we try to affect change and, you know, clean people up rather than knock them down. This is why I wrote an article recently about how to debate people. There's nothing in there about trying to destroy people. In fact, the first thing I say is, like, the title is, how do you win a debate? And then I clarify that by saying, wrong question. It's not about winning. And if you think it's about winning, and we're very prone to thinking it's about winning. I'm prone to thinking it's about winning. But it's not about winning, it's about finding out what's true. And if we think it's about winning, then we've already lost, because we're not going to look into anything that contradicts what we think, which is what the feminists do. Like, the what's the name? Amber Heard Facebook group where they train their little Twitter warriors has specific rules against linking to content that might show Johnny Depp is innocent. And this is because they're trying to brainwash the people in the group. And if you try and go in there and say, hey, you know, I have some doubts, that's about as far as I get before they ban you. Like, they'll probably try and beat you down. And if they can't beat you down, they'll just ban you. But, like, the more hardline they get, the more likely they are to just ban you rather than beat you, which is essentially the internet equivalent to taking you out and shooting you, which is what's these sorts of extremely like tribalistic people do. And these people are, in fact, the people running this thing are grifters. They are her PR team and things like that. But they're trying to create people who are incredibly hardline tribalists, and they are succeeding to a degree. Like, they're getting volunteers, they're getting people to come who, like, do originally believe she's innocent, but then they make it about all women, and they make it so that, you know, if Amber Heard loses, all women lose. So they absolutely can't let Johnny Depp win, even if they realise that all the evidence points to him being innocent and all the evidence points to her being guilty. Like, even the evidence they actually hand you, the Amber Heard supporters, if you actually read through it, it's like, hold on, this is pointing a very different picture to what you know, they're saying it is. Like, for example, the phone thing. If you look at the evidence that Amber Heard supporters give you, what it looks like happened is that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard were arguing, they were shouting at each other, they were getting really riled up. Johnny Depp had a phone in his hand, and he turned around, tossed it behind him, and it knocked her in the face. And she screamed, "You hit me!" And this was heard by somebody else who testified to this. And Johnny Depp's like, "No, I didn't." And he said it very rudely, but he's like, "No, I didn't. Like, you basically get the hair out of your face so I can see." Though he said it like, I'm not even going to repeat what he said because it's incredibly rude. But he said, "Get your hair out of your face so I can see." And the fact that she, like, this is what their evidence essentially says. The fact that she said, "You hit me," on its own is like an element of surprise there.
And for the record, it was an accident when he tossed the phone.
Yeah, it was an accident.
He wasn't aiming. Just so it's clear, because if you threw your phone in someone's face very hard, that would be not good, obviously. But it was an accidental contact.
I'm not even saying that this is how it happened. I'm saying that their evidence, the best, like the most violent case they can come up with, is him accidentally knocking her with this phone. And if you look at the evidence, this is what seems to have happened, because it doesn't match up with him actually hitting her. It matches up with him being surprised that this happened. And then you look deeper into their evidence and you realise that a lot of it points to Amber Heard being extremely violent to him. And I actually was going to go through some of the evidence that they've given me, like just taking them at their word that they're actually using real evidence and they're not making it up. Another really good example is the Johnny Depp getting wasted on a plane, they say. The evidence they use is Johnny Depp saying, "Yeah, I was on a bender for several days, And then on the plane, all I had was 2 bottles of champagne, which is a lot. But he wasn't on a drug bender on the plane. And they will tell you that he was on a drug bender on the plane. And they will use his, like, they will try to tweak his own words into him saying that. And they will give you these 2 screenshots of Rottenborn talking to Johnny Depp on the stand. And in the first screenshot, it's one day, and the Rottenborn is talking about the drug thing, and Johnny Depp is like, I don't actually know what I had on the plane. I think I had a couple of glasses of champagne, but I couldn't really tell you. And then the next day, it's Rottenborn saying, so you were absolutely plastered on the plane, basically, and like.
So they were saying that because they tried to spin it when he said, "I'm not exactly sure what I had." They spun that as, "Oh, that must have mean you were blackout drunk."
Yep, not just blackout drunk, but taking drugs and things like that. They basically took the I don't know, and they ignored the I don't know bit, and then they said that basically that he had said that he didn't take any drugs on the plane. Sorry, I got mixed up a bit. They say that he didn't take any drugs or drink anything on the plane at all. And then they show you this text message where he's saying that he was on this multi-day bender, and then he got on the plane and he had 2 bottles of champagne. And they claim that this is him lying, that this I don't know statement is him lying. The second statement where he I'm mixing it up a lot. In the second statement, he agrees with Rottenborn that he had something to drink on the plane. And they are then taking this and comparing it to the first statement and saying that he was lying because Rottenborn says, yesterday you said that you had alcohol on the plane. And Johnny Depp's like, yeah. And he doesn't really question or critique what Rottenborn is saying. I'm not really doing it justice. I'm really kind of mangling it here. But the basic thing is that Rottenborn essentially took part of what Johnny was saying and used it as, it got rid of the I don't know and used it to say that Johnny was definitely drunk on the plane. And then they're taking this and then going an extra step and saying that Johnny Depp was lying when he said when he said he hadn't really had anything, because they give you this list showing that he was on this bender, but the list clearly says that the bender basically ended before he got on the plane. It was like the night before he got on the plane, and then he gets up and he goes on the plane and he has a couple of bottles. So there was no bender on the plane. There was a couple of bottles of champagne, which is nothing even to like a regular person, really. Like, you can have a couple of bottles of champagne spaced over multiple hours, and if you're at least reasonable at keeping your alcohol in, that's probably not going to make you so drunk that you're raging like all over the plane. It's more sort of the sort of thing that'd probably keep you sort of placid throughout the entire plane ride, I think. Then again, I don't really know that much about drinking, but I don't think that for somebody who's like Johnny Depp, who takes so much drugs they just fall over, it's going to be like multi-day bender sort of levels of drugs compacted into, sorry, it's going to be like that, is what I'm saying. Sorry, I'm a bit, I haven't had much sleep, so I sound like I've been on a bender myself.
What's interesting, though, is you don't see MRAs defend genuinely abusive men. We defend men when we think they're falsely accused, but if a man is genuinely guilty of abuse or rape, we don't defend them whatsoever. It's very
Of course not.
disturbing. It's very disturbing to see the level of Amber Heard gets in a case that doesn't have a lot of gray area. Yes, Johnny Depp had a problem with drugs and alcohol. I'm sure. No, he wasn't perfect, I'm sure. But the overwhelming evidence, including from witnesses who were friends of the couple, the overwhelming evidence is that Johnny Depp was the primary victim and Amber Heard was the primary abuser. And it's not very close in this. Amber Heard never had to go to hospital to get severe lacerations treated. Amber Heard was never attacked with a weapon. Amber Heard isn't the one who was on record saying that she was afraid of getting close to him. And Amber Heard is on tape admitting violence. It's not a confusing case. I mean, it's pretty black and white for the most part. And yet the degree of support Amber Heard is getting is scary because it makes you think these people will always follow the party line. So if you ever find yourself in the courtroom and people that think that way are on the jury, they will be fighting to send you to prison regardless of the evidence. So imagine when people like that become law professors. Like Charlotte Proudman is a barrister. She's a lawyer. Think how scary that is. I mean, people with this mentality, this tribalistic mentality, us versus them over everything no matter what, even over the facts. Imagine when these people start getting elected in office, start becoming judges or police officers. It is very scary.
Well, they have been for quite a while. They're in the CDC and all sorts of places. This is the Mary Kosses and the the feminist academia and all that sort of stuff. They're extremely ideological about this, and they don't care about the facts. I mean, first thing we did when we were looking into the Depp thing is, okay, is this guy actually innocent or guilty? Because if he's guilty and we support him, then everyone's going to use that against us. Just everyone. And we also don't want to be supporting like a guilty man. Like, this is why we didn't get involved in the Weinstein stuff or the what's his face who used to do that the comedian, what's his name,
Bill Cosby.
Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah, we don't get involved with Bill Cosby. Like we've just.
Well, no, we did. We did get involved with Bill
basically
Cosby.
ignored the guy.
We did. MRAs did get involved. They came out and said, "Yeah, we think Harvey Weinstein is guilty and should go to jail. Yeah, we think Bill Cosby is guilty and should go to jail." So we did get involved. We said, "Yeah, we don't support these people." I mean, I know I did. I know I saw plenty of posts on the subreddit about it. I know we mentioned it on the server multiple times during these very chats. That we not only don't support those people, but are against those people.
That's fair enough. I mean, I didn't get involved with it because I didn't. I thought that they looked more guilty than innocent, so I decided to opt out of really getting strongly involved in either side. But I do think that they are probably both guilty, and so I'm not going to support them.
Yeah, there have been bad stories about Harvey Weinstein for decades around Hollywood. And my issue with it, an issue with it, I should say, is how the people in Hollywood knew about this for years, and they were still perfectly willing to talk about him. Bryan Singer is another example. People are perfectly willing to work with him and to make money for him and from him. It's unbelievably hypocritical. I could go on a rant about. Those of you who don't know, I lived in LA for 5 years in the film industry, and the hypocrisy of those people talking about morality is astounding. Truly.
I mean, the morality in Hollywood is the morality of their pockets. Let's be honest. Depp lost his case, the first one. Obviously not the second one in the US. And immediately they were giving Heard everything, even though it had already been shown that Heard done so much wrong and that there were possible conflicts of interest within the case that would make the case invalid. But it was moral because, well, it was Amber Heard. And it was a woman who was a victim. And
think-
Hollywood pushes political agendas more than anyone else, no matter how much they try to claim, oh, we don't push political agendas. It's a complete farce.
When Moss said, to what extent do you think people defend Amber Heard just because they think even if she is guilty, it's important to stick up for women in these scenarios? And what percent do you think genuinely believe that she's innocent and that's why they support her?
Of the public or of Hollywood?
Just in general, of people who support Amber Heard. I know what Hollywood thinks. Everyone knows she's nuts. Like the things that you hear.
Wait, is this a question to everyone?
Sure.
I don't
I'll
think
do-
most people do.
I'll let Katrina, I guess, go first. But well, you just answered. Katrina, what do you think?
I mean, I don't think most people genuinely believe it, but I mean, I think some people do. I mean, I don't know how to explain this because I realize this talking to people. There seems to be this large issue that I'm seeing pop up where women, not all women obviously, but like there are women out there who know that men have issues, but they still say things like "kill men" or "the male race sucks" because they think that, oh, even if a woman does something wrong, they're still entitled to, to hit the person, to say what they want because women were supposedly oppressed for so long. Because of, obviously, the history that we're taught in schools, which is not an accurate history of all of feminism or female rights.
Yeah, it's and
Reparations, that's what's the name of it. Reparations, that's the word they would use. They believe that they can take reparations back through whatever words they say, actions, hurtful things.
And that's scary because where do you go with that mentality? It's like debating someone like that is worthless because even if they know you're right, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
And it's scary to think how far those people would be willing to go.
Proudman, I think it was, said that the Depp trial had nothing to do with facts or truth or something.
Her
I don't know if she
entire,
deleted the Twitter.
her entire existence has nothing to do with facts.
Yeah, well, Proudman's doesn't. It is shocking the sorts of things that woman says.
What's shocking, what scares me isn't that people like Proudman exist. It's that she has so much support every time she tweets pure hate, pure vitriol, pure misandry, pure bigotry. Sometimes bordering on. She's careful in how she words herself, of course, but bordering on excusing or even encouraging violence against men, and it gets supported. When Sarah Jong tweeted about killing white men and she was defended, people were supporting her.
Because of reparations and because just of the hype train. People nowadays don't think, they don't read, they don't use logic, they just jump on the train and join along. There's none of the current movements that are going on within the world and the United States that are getting the most amount of media attention are based on any form of fact. They're based on the pure and collective, they're based on the collective of people who are not willing or don't care to read or to fully investigate, who just want something to jump into. You know, we're living in a day and age of what might look best, what's everyone else doing, and copying it. And that's where we're at with movements as well. Nothing's being done to properly change things because they're only doing what looks optically best and not what is genuinely the best option. The real complicated answer or semi-answer to the problem.
Do you think the MRM is part of the answer to that problem?
To a certain degree. I think the MRM can work its way. There are logical parts to it, but it is a little complicated to push that right now due to the amount of negative media, and also just, I'm gonna be honest, even within our own server, I love being a mod and an admin of the server, and I love our server, and I love the people that talk, but we do have our own issues where we end up having one or two radical people that come in every month or so, and that turns into the example.
There's nothing you can do about that to an extent. Once any group reaches a certain size, it's impossible to keep things 100% quote-unquote pure or good. There's always going to be the bad apples, there's always going to be the radicals, there's always going to be the people that come in with malicious intentions and the trolls. But I'd say, overall, compared to many other, if not most other servers I've seen, I think we do a very good job of keeping things on the up and up.
I do. I think my issue is that I know there's nothing you can change about it, but that sometimes it becomes a little too big of a voice. I mean, bad but sort of good example, Andrew Tate. He makes a lot of logical points once in a while, but he also makes a lot of very controversial points. And that's the problem, is we've got too many people like that, where they make fair points that we agree with, but they make more controversial and negative points that we don't agree with than they do points we do agree with. And so it becomes this issue of having to make people realize, how do you debate better? How do you, find the real issues that we're fighting for? How do you look past the bullshit? Sorry to swear for anyone who's under 18.
It is tiring, for sure. It is tiring. But we have to do it because no one else will. Anyway, Katrina, do you want to bring us out?
Sure. Does no one has any last commentary?
Sorry, I should have asked. Yeah,
No,
people.
so you go ahead and lead us out, and I'll shut it off, and we can go free talk.
Well, thank you all for coming to this week's Saturday live stream in the Men Human Rights Discord server. We are the semi-official Discord server of the Men Human Rights subreddit. We are here every Saturday at 1:30 Central Time, 2:30 Eastern, which is 7:30 UK time. We always love having you here. If you have topics which you'd like to recommend, you can always message Blue, Men Are Human, or myself. We love hearing your topics, and we love hearing you come and join us. And we'll see you all next week.